Hello Year 9, this is Mr. McGettigan and welcome to another English lesson. Today's lesson is going to move on. We've been looking at lots recently. Well, this term we finished Of Mice and Men, and you guys did an assessment on that. We then looked at the Black Lives Matter movement, and we looked at some literature surrounding that, and we looked at extracts from novels, The Hate You Give and Noughts and Crosses, and we looked at poems, Still I Rise by Maya Angelou. And now we're going to move on to another social issue, which is the death penalty. And over the next 2 weeks, you guys are going to be exploring arguments for and against the death penalty, and you are going to be looking at case studies, and you're going to be looking at articles and arguments, and you're going to really start to develop your own ideas, informed ideas about the death penalty, and whether you think it's a good thing or a bad thing, or you think it's good but has some bad things to it, or bad with some good things to it. There we go. So in today's lesson, let's move on. Today's lesson, you are going to hopefully understand how the death penalty is used today. You're going to consider your own opinions on its use, and you're going to look at some specific cases from the UK in preparation for our study in the US, which will be on our next lesson. It'll be on Wednesday's lesson. Okay, so these are our learning objectives for today. So, bear with me 1 second while here we go. So the death penalty in the UK. Up until relatively recently, we used the death penalty. Now, the death penalty, if you didn't know, is the use of death as a sentence for a crime. Okay, it is killing someone if they have committed a crime, specific crimes. Okay, so the death penalty in the United Kingdom was used throughout history up until 1964, when the last hanging took place, and hanging somebody by their neck was one of the most common forms of the death penalty in the UK. It technically remained legal for citizens to be convicted of treason until 1998. In 2004, the European Convention on Human Rights, which is an organisation which defends all of the human rights of people who live in the European Union and surrounding areas, in 2004, the European Convention of Human Rights made it impossible to reinstate the practice for as long as the UK is a member. Now, that's a key point. Remember, we have recently left the EU. When it was abolished, which means taken away, support for the death penalty remained high, with more than 2/3 of the population supporting it. So a lot of people wanted to keep the death penalty when it was abolished. And in 2015, a poll showed that this had dropped to below 50% for the first time ever. Okay, and so this is some quite recent statistics of people in the UK. The question was, are you in favour of the death penalty? 48% said they are in favour, they think it's a good thing. 44% said they were not in favour, they thought it was a bad thing. And 8% said that they didn't know. Okay, and the next question on these statistics, on these studies, was, would you be more or less likely to convict someone facing the death penalty if you were a juror? Okay, so this question means if you were on the jury deciding if they were guilty or not guilty, and you knew that they might face the death penalty, would you be more likely to convict them and find them guilty, or less likely? And 13% said that they were more likely. 23% said that they were less likely to convict, so quite a lot more said that they were less likely to convict. 54% said that they saw no difference whether there was the death penalty or not, and 10% said that they didn't know. Okay, so there's a little bit of statistics just to give you a little bit of background as to where people recently fell on this argument as to whether we should have it or we shouldn't have it. Okay, So it's still a topic of discussion and debate today. And recently, just now, I mentioned that we've recently left the UK. That the process that we went through is called Brexit, and I'm sure you guys know about that. And are some statistics from the independent newspaper and Statista, which is a statistics company. And they basically do studies on what people think and how people feel about certain aspects of society and politics and that kind of thing. So the question was, what Leave voters want to happen in the UK after Brexit? So this is people who voted to leave the UK and what they wanted to happen after we left the UK. And these are percentages share of Leave voters who say the following should be brought back. And 53% of all the people that voted Leave said that they wanted the death penalty brought back. Okay. And then you've got dark blue passports at 52%, selling goods in pounds and ounces rather than grams and kilograms. 48% corporal punishment in schools, so that's hitting children if they do if they're naughty or if they're misbehaving, we can actually physically hit you. 42% of Leave voters wanted that to be brought back, so it's quite interesting to see that, and it might and there's some other points that we can bring in there as well. Okay, but high up, and the most important statistics for this lesson is that 53% of Leave voters said they wanted the death penalty back. Now, this is a study that has been done. It's not a study of all the Leave voters in the country. This will have been a cross-section. Okay, so a sample, and we can see here that it was a sample of 2,060 Great British adults. So of that sample, those that remained that were Leave voters, 53% of those wanted the death penalty. Okay, so there's a little bit of statistics to back that up. So we're now going to do a case review. Okay, we're going to look at 3 real cases from British criminal history, and what I would like you to do for each one is I want you to decide whether or not you feel the death penalty should have been applied. Now, none of these cases had the death penalty applied. I want you to think, should that have been applied? Should we get the death penalty back for people like this? So for each case, you must state, or you must write down, I'd like you for each one of these to write down whether you believe the death penalty should or shouldn't have been applied, your reasons for this. So you could say, I believe that the death penalty should be applied because, or shouldn't be applied because, and whether you believe the death sentence was sufficient. The sentence given, was sufficient. So I'm going to tell you what the sentence was, and you think whether that was sufficient, whether that was enough. Okay? So, case study 1. Ben Gunn. Okay, at the age of 14, so he was under the age, he wasn't an adult, he was 14, Ben Gunn was convicted of beating to death an 11-year-old friend with a school table leg. He called an ambulance immediately after committing the crime and gave a full confession in court. He was given a minimum jail term of 10 years and ended up serving 32 years. So he spent 32 years in prison, many of them at Shepton Mallet Prison. He was released in 2012. Okay, so I want you to tell me, write down if you think the death penalty should or shouldn't have been applied for Ben Gunn. What's your reason for this? So say why, and whether you think this sentence of a minimum of 10 years but actually serving 32 years, was that enough for beating to death an 11-year-old with a school table leg? Remember, he called the ambulance immediately after committing the crime. He didn't try and get away with it or anything like that. And he gave a full confession in court. Okay, that's case study number 1. Pause this video now and write down what you think about the death penalty for this in this particular case. Go. Okay, so the next case study is case number 2, Harold Shipman. Harold Shipman was Britain's most prolific serial killer. That means that he killed more people as a serial killer than any other serial killer ever in history. He is the only British doctor to have been found guilty of murdering his patients. According to the public inquiry into his crimes, the former family doctor killed at least 250 of his patients over 23 years. He killed 250 of his patients over 23 years. Bit of background to that: he killed them by giving them doses that he knew would kill them. He injected poisonous medicines into people. He clearly intended to kill these 250 people, and that was over 23 years. He got away with doing that. Eventually he was found and tried, and he was sentenced to 15 consecutive life sentences with a recommendation that he should never be released. So a life sentence is 33 years, and he's been sentenced to 15 consecutive life sentences. There's a recommendation he should never be released. He will never be released from prison. Okay? I want you now, looking at all of this information that we have about Harold Shipman, okay, state whether you believe, write down whether you believe the death penalty should or shouldn't have been applied, your reasons for this, and whether you believe the sentence that he was given was sufficient. Was it enough? I would like you to remember you should be writing in full sentences, please, Year 9. You are not in one of those subjects where we expect just a short sentence or anything like that. Write in full sentences, capital letters, punctuation, full stops, everything like that. Okay? So that's case number 2, Harold Shipman. Case study number 3 was Brian Reader. And in 2015, Reader led a gang of elderly men, all experienced thieves, in the burglary of an underground safe facility. The gang stole gold, diamonds and other valuables with an estimated worth of 200 million, much of which has not been recovered. So they have not been able to get those goods back or that cash back. He was sentenced to 6 years and 3 months in prison in 2016. So he's still serving that particular sentence. Okay, so he stole diamonds, gold and other valuables to the value of 200 million pounds. Okay, I would like you, again, in full sentences, write down whether you believe the death penalty should have been applied for this man, what are your reasons for this or not, and whether you believe the sentence given was sufficient. Okay, do that now, please. You can pause the video while you're doing that or catching up with case studies number 1 or number 2. Okay, so we're going to move on now. So in your books, I would like you to draw up a table which looks very similar to this, please. On one column, I'd like you to write down arguments for the death penalty and leave some space to make some notes. And I would like you on the other column to write arguments against the death penalty. And as we go through these arguments on this slide, I want you to use this table to summarize them. Don't simply copy them out. I will read these arguments to you. I would like you to summarize the information that I'm giving you. Argument and put them in the right category. Do you think it's an argument for the death penalty or it's an argument against the death penalty? Pause the video, draw up that table now, please. Okay, so we're now going to move on. So here are arguments for the death penalty that I would like you to summarize. If someone murders someone else, they have given up their human rights, including the one to stay alive themselves. The punishment should fit the crime. If you've killed someone, you should be killed too. Giving a killer a death sentence will stop them and others from doing it again. So it's a deterrent. It deters people from doing it because they know they might get the death sentence. And the very small chance of executing the wrong person is balanced by the benefits to society of putting off other murderers. And I would like you to add those in summary to the left column of your table, and I would like you to add 3 of your own. Pause the video and do that now, please. Okay, we're now going to look at arguments against the death penalty. And again, I'd like you to summarize these and write them into your right-hand column. The death penalty goes against our most basic human right, the right to life. Being killed by lethal injection or being electrocuted is not always smooth and painless. Sometimes it causes a very painful death. No one has ever proven with numbers that killing murderers stops other people committing similar crimes. Mistakes are sometimes made in the law. What if someone is killed who is actually innocent? So summarize those arguments, write them into your table, and I would like you again to add 3 arguments of your own, please. Pause the video and complete the table. Okay, so now you should have a table with arguments for and against the death penalty, with the arguments that I've just given you, but also some ideas of your own underneath those. Okay, we're now going to move on. I would like you to write a short paragraph explaining your own views on the death penalty, what you think. Now, it doesn't have to be exactly for or against. You might say we shouldn't have it, but, or might say we should have it, but. Okay, so I want you to just write down a paragraph, and it should be a short paragraph. I'm not looking for 2 or 3 lines. I'm looking for 7, 8, 9 lines, maybe half a side of A4. You know, go into some detail when you're making your points, please. Explain your own views on the death penalty, given what we've just learned and what we've just read this lesson. Okay. Pause the video and do that now, please. And as we're coming to the end of our lesson now, I want you to think, did your view change at all during this lesson, or did it stay the same? Okay. In your paragraph, you should be aiming to cover whether you broadly agree or disagree with the death penalty. What, if any, crimes do you think it should or shouldn't be used for, or could be used for? What you believe any beyond reasonable doubt is a sufficient level of proof, and how long you feel should take place between sentencing and execution, and give your reasons for this. Okay, so if you really want to challenge yourself, now you could add to cover, aim to cover all of these bullet points in your paragraph. Okay, that's some work to really challenge those of you that really want to push your writing and your thinking that little bit further. Okay, that is everything for this lesson now, guys. So you should have all got some ideas about the case studies written down. You should have your arguments for and against, and a paragraph that might really be quite challenging for you, outlining what your opinions are. This work is going to be needed as you move on through the following 6 or 7 lessons that we do on the death penalty. Okay, we hope you're all well, that you're keeping up with this work, and that you are staying safe. That's me saying goodbye. Cheerio, ta-ta, bye-bye.